Hi, thanks for joining me today. This is Dr. Stewart from Dr. Stewart Productions. And the election is over, but it's still ongoing in many parts of the country. Ballots are being counted. Our ballot, or our voting here, was over about a week and a half ago when we voted, my wife and I did. But it's kind of interesting to me that in some parts of the country, especially like Florida and I think Maine, perhaps Arizona just until recently, the ballots are still being counted. And I've been hearing a term that is very interesting to me. I have never really understood this term. I guess the word doesn't go with the concept. But we're going to talk today about what is a provisional ballot. That's, again, a very interesting concept to me, a provisional ballot. I've never had to cast a provisional ballot. I've always had my ID. I've always registered to vote and so forth. But it's interesting to me that as we go through this little presentation on provisional ballots, perhaps it will help all of us understand a little bit more about what is wrong with our voting system. Credit from this presentation and the information goes to the National Conference for State Legislators. They do have a website. You can go there and look up some of this material. So thank you so much for the ncsi.org information that I received from them. And provisional ballots came into existence in 2002 as a response to the close election of George Bush in the year 2000. So before 2002, there was no such thing as a provisional ballot. Do you remember all the problems in, again, South Florida? Isn't that something? South Florida with the 2000 election, I distinctly remember that. But it was interesting to me that before that election, we didn't have this problem. So we go back to the year 2002. It had been the law that all questionable ballots should be dismissed in 2000, I'm saying. It was the law back in those days that all questionable ballots were dismissed and not counted in the total election results. Many in Congress felt that this was not fair, and they designed a way to help many questionable voters cast their ballots. And I'm trying to emphasize the word questionable, because basically this whole concept of a provisional ballot is for questionable situations and questionable individuals. So they passed a law in 2002 called the Help America Vote Act of 2002, and it was signed into law by George Bush. So first of all, as we talk in this presentation about provisional ballots, I want to talk to you about what is a provisional ballot, at least a little bit more. This information as a definition comes from wikipedia.com. In elections in the U.S., a provisional ballot is used to record a vote when there are questions about a given voter's eligibility. Notice the word eligibility. They must be resolved first before the vote can count. All right, let me read that again. In elections in the U.S., a provisional ballot is used to record a vote when there are questions about a given voter's eligibility that must be resolved before the vote can count. Now, it's interesting to me that in Georgia, a judge ordered that all votes be counted. Do you realize that all votes here mean also provisional votes? And when the liberal Democrats say we need to count all votes, they're referring to all the provisional votes as well. So that's kind of interesting to me that these have to be investigated first. Questions of eligibility have to be resolved. So if you have a county or precinct with 5,000 voters, let's just say, and let's say 500 of those are provisional, that means all 500 have to be investigated first before they can be counted in the total tally. So I wonder if some big states like New York or California, or I was thinking especially the Miami-Dade area, that's where I grew up, down in West Palm Beach, Florida, Palm Beach County, where you have hundreds of thousands and you might have 10,000 provisional votes. How in the world are they going to investigate every single one of those, make sure they're eligible, and then count them? So the whole process is questionable to me. How are the provisional ballots counted? Okay, we looked at what is a provisional ballot. By the way, here's how they go through the process. First of all, a man or a woman goes in to vote. And when they're asked who they are, they give their name. And if they say something like this, okay, now, sir, where do you live? And he says, oh, I just moved here. I don't remember my address. Well, then they get a provisional ballot affirmation where they're supposed to fill it out. And then after this, they go vote. After they fill out a form similar to this, after they vote, the ballot is put in another container. This says here, placed in a sealed envelope in the orange voted provisional ballot bag. In other words, it's separated from all the other ballots. It's not run through the machine yet. Okay, when my wife and I voted, our ballots were run through an electronic machine. It was automatically counted, I could imagine. Maybe, yes, it would have been automatically counted. So these are put aside, they're separated, and then the voter receives a receipt. See, he's not sure yet if his vote has even counted. It's going to take several days or maybe a week. Most of these states have deadlines. So he receives a voter receipt. Here's one that has a receipt number where he can call a phone number or look it up online, put in his number, and find out if his vote counted or not. Here's another one here with a barcode, and I guess he would call, give them the number, they would look it up perhaps, or maybe he could still go online if he could scan this barcode, and then he could find out if his vote counted or not. So you see, the whole thing, the whole question about provisional ballots is questionable. We're not sure whether that person deserves to vote. Anybody could go anywhere and say, I am John Smith, what's your address? Oh, I'm not sure. Okay, well, fill this out. And they could go to this precinct, and this precinct, and this precinct, and vote multiple times very easily. Okay, so how are provisional ballots counted? A determination is then made as to whether the voter was eligible to vote, and therefore whether the ballot is to be counted. Generally, now listen to this, this comes from the National Conference of State Legislatures, and I can imagine they would have updated information on this. Therefore, they would find out if it was to be counted, and generally a board of elections or local elections officials will investigate the provisional ballots within days of the election. So if you have 1,000 provisional voters or ballots, you're going to have multiple people investigating each one to meet a certain deadline.